everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope that you're having a good Thanksgiving, or you had a good Thanksgiving if it's already passed. I am getting ready to work on my third Cards, Tags, and More project for Tres Jolie Kit. I figured a good project for the end of November, right before the official shopping season starts up, would be to make some gift tags. So I am just going to use all of the bits and pieces and scraps I have left, some dies for my stash, a couple of embossing folders, and I am going to get to work making a variety of gift tags. This first one didn't really end up with a lot from this month's kit on it. I just put a small tag at the bottom of it by the time I was done. I just started adding some mediums to the embossed image and didn't really even think about what I was doing until I was almost done, and I realized I ended up coloring in almost all of it, which I hadn't even originally planned on. I used some distress markers and some Lindy's embossing powder for the smaller pieces of greenery. And then on the large leaves, I used the embossing markers and some fern green, I think it was fern green Ranger embossing powder. And then after all of that, I decided that the flower needed to show up a little bit better. So I just brushed over the raised part of the embossed image with my Candied Apple Red distress marker, some Lindy's embossing powder, some Ranger embossing powder, and just a touch of gold embossing powder around the center. I found myself not knowing exactly what I was going to do with it, but I did want to mute the background a little bit, so I spritzed on some antique linen distress oxide, wiped it from the embossed areas, and got it dried up, and then just added some microglaze just to protect that distress oxide. For this card, I am just brushing right off the end of the cracked pistachio watercolor pencil and just adding a little bit of shading to the embossed image. I'm just going to brush on some embossing ink from my Ranger embossing ink refill bottle. I'm not adding it everywhere or covering every area that I had just put that watercolor pencil on. I'm not being overly careful. I am going to make this kind of vintagey and worn looking. And then I am just adding on some clear Antiquities embossing powder. The Antiquities embossing powders, they don't dry shiny. They dry with a matte finish. And I'm just rough brushing on some more of that embossing ink. And I am watering it down and reactivating that watercolor pencil from the back side of the card, cleaning off the top of the embossed image a little bit, and just sprinkling on some aqua tinsel. I think it's called aqua tinsel Ranger embossing powder, and then I am brushing it off the embossed image so that it is just on the background, and adding a little bit more of that Antiquities in there with it. With all of that embossing powder dry and cooled back down, I am going to start adding some color to the layers I'm going to be building up. This is more of that antique linen distress oxide spray. I just crunched up a paper towel so the lined area of that small ephemera piece wouldn't get covered in spray. And to add a little bit of darker areas of antique linen, I'm using the antique linen watercolor pencil. I'm brushing it into areas around the edges where the distress oxide spray was. Just making little drops of it, dark splotches of that antique linen watercolor pencil. And then in some places, I just get water to run down the tip of the pencil and drip directly off the pencil onto my backgrounds. For this background, I am using my candy stripe stencil. I just come in and I use some, I think it's called Jingle. It's in the All of the names of the products are on the blog, but I just come in and I use some stickles with that stencil and spread it across that piece of paper. I roughed up the edges of this green ornament piece with some scissors, and I'm just lining it up on the background and making a rather large tag with it. And I just folded the top over there. I didn't really have a particular reason. I didn't necessarily want to cut it off. This was going to be my last project of the month using these papers, so I just folded it over. It does add a little bit of extra strength to one end of the tag there. And then it does also just kind of clean up the back and make it all match on the back side. I'm going to start building up my big snow flurry tag here, and I am just cutting around the embossed areas, making a little slot for that piece of ephemera to go through. I hadn't originally planned on cutting more than a little bit of a slot, but as I got going, I realized that I liked having that smaller piece of ephemera stick up a little bit higher than the top of my embossed picture. So I was able to just cut through one of those snow flurries and bring it back and lay it across that. And I am just fussy cutting out the little snowflakes that had come from that background. I had cut them out so they wouldn't get covered up with that piece of ephemera. And then I just fussy cut them out and glued them back down into place. All right, my three mixed media tags are set off and drying, and I'm kind of thinking about them a little bit more, and I am just going to start work on the smaller tags that are more assembly using the pieces that I had die cut out earlier. I just grabbed up a little bottle. I think that was my microglaze bottle. And the lid of the microglaze bottle was just the right size for me to use as an outline so that I would be able to get my wreath built up and make sure that it stayed in a circle. And I do use all those little pieces of foliage that I had cut, the leaves, the pine needle type things. And I'm just adding on the little ornament circle type things that I had cut using one of those dies. And then I just set my wreath tag off and let that glue dry while I get to work on my other smaller tags. For the rest of these tags, I guess fiddle around and play around with the bits and the pieces and my die cuts and the pieces of ephemera I had left, and a couple of them are laminated. They were pieces I had laminated that I had thought I was going to use in my recipe book that I posted the first week on the 3rd. I think it was my recipe book project was posted on the 3rd of the month. So these 3 cards have lamination on them, but now they're just laminated tags. And it works out. It'll make them last a little bit longer. People could keep them, make them little keepsakes, bookmarks, something like that. They do serve a kind of dual purpose now. I get my pieces clipped together how I'm going to be wanting them, or at least how I'm going to be layering things up and which pieces I'm putting where, because I will be taking things over to my sewing machine and stitching my layers together. But before I do all of that all at once, I am going to finish trimming up my poinsettia. I just trim down the edges, get it as close to that embossed image as I can without cutting off any of the foliage. And when I first started cutting around the image, I had originally only planned on doing the petals of the flower and just kind of curling them up and giving it a little bit of dimension. But as I went along, I decided I wanted to do a little bit more, and I cut out, I don't know, maybe about, let me look at that here. Maybe about 75% of the way around the flower, just all the way around, and put it on a backing, a piece of cardstock behind it, and now it's just a little tuck-in spot. You could put a little Christmas note in there, a gift card, something like that. With all of my layers stitched together, I am just going to grab up some little alpha stamps, and I am using some stays on, mostly because I do have those few that are laminated, and the stays on will work perfectly fine and stay on that laminated surface. And this is where I came in on that poinsettia when I realized that I had done that entire image and not used any of the kit papers on it, so I had to stick that little tag on there for the to and the from. And then my snow flurry one is because that ephemera has a Santa North Pole address on it, then it is going to be a from Santa card. And I just go through all of them and do my to and my froms and my fors, or however I thought of putting things on there. I think most of them are for and from or to and from. And now all of my gift tags are completed, and I'm just using some red baker's twine to put through all of the holes on the tags, or at least the ones that have a spot for them. Using just the smaller pieces that you may have left from other projects, you can make some quick little tags to really personalize your gifts. I hope that you enjoyed this project and it gave you some ideas of what you can do if you need some gift tags for that holiday shopping. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications if you haven't already. Give us a thumbs up and feel free to share this video. Thank you, and I will see you again soon.